My friends, if we are to begin this journey together, let us begin with a simple but profound recognition. Most of what you believe to be your life, your struggles, your triumphs, your failures, even your identity, is not your own. It is the world's. It is the hypnosis of the collective mind, the universal belief in separation from God, the belief in life lived apart from an infinite presence. You were born into this atmosphere before you ever spoke a word, before you ever made a choice, before you ever asked a question. And because you came into it unknowingly, you accepted it unquestioningly. You assumed that what the world presented to your senses was reality. But you see, the appearances of the world are never reality. They are the dream state of humanity, the universal mesmerism that covers the truth of being like a veil. This hypnosis of the world mind is why fear seems natural, why lack seems threatening, why disease appears powerful, why conflict feels personal. Not because these conditions hold any actual power, but because the mind, trained by the world, accepts the visible as cause rather than effect. It believes that life is governed from without rather than from within. And so, men and women spend their years trying to change the outer picture, unaware that every picture is the outworking of consciousness, and that the moment consciousness is lifted, the picture must change of its own accord. We are not here to improve the dream, nor to resist it, nor to manipulate it. We are here to awaken from it. The purpose of this work is not to give you a better world, but to reveal the world as it is when you see through the mist of hypnotic belief. You will discover that nothing separates you from harmony but the acceptance of appearance as power. You will discover that nothing blocks the flow of abundance but the belief that supply comes from persons and conditions. And you will discover that nothing obstructs your peace but the notion that you are a human being struggling through a human experience. When Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world," He was not speaking of another location, another dimension, or another realm. He was speaking of consciousness. Your consciousness, when it is free of the world mind, the kingdom of God is within you, not in the heavens, not in the future, not as a reward for good behavior, but as the ever-present reality obscured only by belief in separation. So we begin by acknowledging this. The suffering of the world is not imposed upon you by God, nor is it the truth of your being. It is the product of a hypnotized sense of life, and the moment you recognize this, even faintly, the spell begins to lose its hold, the dream begins to thin, the veil begins to open, and what shines through that opening is the reality you have never been separated from, the presence you have never lacked, the harmony you have never truly lost. Let us, then, set aside the temptation to fix appearances and instead learn to see beyond them, for as long as you attempt to rearrange the outer world, you remain asleep to the inner truth. But the moment you turn within, quietly, without demand, without fear, without effort, you will begin to sense the gentle whisper of the infinite announcing itself, "I am here. I am your life. I am your sufficiency. I am your peace." And in that recognition, the great hypnosis begins to dissolve. This is the first step on the path, recognizing the world mind for what it is and yourself for what you are. As we proceed, let us look more closely at this thing we call the world mind. For unless you understand its nature, you will continue to attribute to yourself what never belonged to you in the first place. The world mind is not a personal intelligence. It is not your thinking, nor is it the thinking of any one individual. It is the accumulated belief of the human race, the universal sense of separation from God, and it operates impersonally through every mind that is not awake to the presence within. From the moment you enter this world, you breathe in this atmosphere of universal fear and ignorance as naturally as you breathe the air. Before you can speak your first word, the world mind has begun to instruct you that your safety lies in the outer world, that your supply lies in material resources, that your health lies in the condition of the body, and that your worth lies in the opinions of others. You are taught to measure life by appearances, to judge reality by the senses, and to trust only what can be seen, touched, counted, or controlled. And all of this is accepted without question because no one tells you otherwise. Thus, humanity grows up with a sense of life that is fundamentally hypnotic. People react automatically to the suggestions of the world mind. They fear financial lack not because lack is real, but because the world mind believes in limitation. They fear illness not because illness has power, but because the world mind believes the body is separate from the source of life. They fear rejection, loss, and failure, because the world mind believes each person is an isolated self struggling against an unfriendly universe, and this belief in separation reproduces itself endlessly in every mind that has not awakened to truth. But, my friends, let this be recognized. These are not your fears. These are not your beliefs. These are not your thoughts. This is the world mind acting upon you as long as you identify yourself as a human being living in a human universe. The moment you accept that these thoughts are mine, you give them power they do not possess. You take ownership of that which never belonged to you. You adopt as personal a universal mesmerism that operates impersonally, Joel would often say. You are not responsible for the thoughts that come to you. You are responsible only for whether you accept them. And that is the crux of awakening, to stand still long enough to discern the difference between the suggestions of the world mind and the truth arising from within. The world mind says, you are vulnerable, but the inner presence whispers, I am with thee always. The world mind says, you must struggle for supply, but the inner presence declares, all that the Father has is yours. The world mind says, you are a body subject to decay, but the inner presence reveals, I am life eternal. Every conflict you have ever experienced begins with mistaking the voice of the world mind for the voice of your own consciousness. Every healing begins with the recognition that the world mind has no power of its own, no authority, no law, no substance, and that the infinite presence within you is the only reality. When you understand this, even faintly, the spell begins to loosen. You no longer see yourself as a being struggling in a hostile environment. You begin to sense that there is a deeper life living you, a deeper intelligence governing you, a deeper love sustaining you. And this recognition marks the end of spiritual sleep and the beginning of awakening. It is from this recognition that we move forward, for now you can begin to see that what you have called your life has been largely a reaction to a universal hypnosis. And what you truly are has never been touched by it. And now we come to a vital point, one that cannot merely be understood intellectually, but must be quietly realized within your own being. The world mind, which we have described as the collective hypnotic influence, has a curious ability. It presents to you only a fraction of reality and convinces you that this fraction is the whole. It shows you the visible, the tangible, the measurable, and then persuades you that life is nothing more than what can be observed with the senses. But, my friends, the senses reveal only the outermost rim of existence. They show you the finished picture on the canvas, but never the painter. They show you the fruit on the branch, but never the life force that brought it forth. They show you the body, but not the life that animates the body. In truth, the visible world is but 1% of reality. The remaining 99% is invisible, spiritual, incorporeal, yet infinitely more substantial than anything the senses report. It is this 99% that the world mind blinds you to. The world mind insists you are a material being in a material world. But the truth is, you are a spiritual being in a spiritual universe, temporarily believing in material sense. The world mind points to your bank account and declares, "This is your supply." It points to your body and declares, "This is your health." It points to circumstances and declares, "This is your destiny." And because you have not yet awakened to the invisible dimension of life, you accept these declarations as final. But I say to you, with all the authority of the infinite behind it, nothing the senses show you is self-governing, self-existent, or self-created. Every visible form is an effect, never a cause. The cause, the substance, the life, the law, all of it lies in the unseen realm of consciousness. Let us take this slowly, gently, and with inner quiet, for it is one of the most important recognitions on the spiritual path. When you look at a tree, you do not see the life that produced the tree. When you look at a body, you do not see the consciousness that sustains it. When you look at money, you do not see the divine ideas that unfold as supply. When you look at relationships, you do not see the presence that animates every soul. What you see are the shadows of a far deeper reality. The world mind hypnotizes humanity into mistaking the shadow for the substance. It convinces you that the pictures on the screen are the source of your experience, never showing you the projector behind them. And so, you try to change your life by changing the shadows, rather than awakening to the light that produces them. This is why men and women struggle endlessly with conditions of health, conditions of finance, conditions of relationship, never realizing that these conditions are only the outer garments of their inner state. They rearrange the surface of life, but the surface is only 1%. The 99% remains untouched, unseen, unrecognized, and because consciousness is cause, the outer forms inevitably return to their previous patterns. When Jesus said, "Judge not according to appearance," he was not calling for moral restraint. He was giving you the key to liberation. He was saying, do not accept the 1% as the truth. Look through it. Look beyond it. Look within. For within you lies the 99%, the divine presence, the infinite storehouse, the eternal life that never fades, never weakens, never diminishes. The moment you cease living by appearances even momentarily and rest in the invisible presence, the outer world begins to reorganize itself according to the harmony of the inner. You are no longer reacting to shadows, but recognizing the reality behind them, and this recognition is the beginning of spiritual vision. Let us pause with this. Reality is not hidden from you, it is only hidden from the senses. Your task is not to change the visible, but to awaken to the invisible that governs all. From this point forward, our work shifts from correcting surface problems to recognizing the spiritual substance beneath every appearance. And as this recognition deepens, the hypnosis of the world mind loses its power, and you begin to see life as it truly is, not as the senses have trained you to believe. Now, my friends, once you understand that the world you have been reacting to is but a hypnotic presentation of the world mind, and that the senses show only the outermost fraction of reality, the question arises naturally. How do we awaken? How do we break the spell that has held us since birth? And the answer may surprise you, for it is not found in effort, nor in resistance, nor in mental struggle of any kind. You awaken from hypnosis the moment you stop fighting the shadows and begin to recognize their unreality. You see, no one ever emerged from a dream by wrestling with the images in the dream. You awaken by realizing they have no life apart from the consciousness that beholds them. And so it is with the world mind. The more you resist its appearances, the more real they become to you, the more you fear them, the more power you attribute to them. But the moment you quietly observe them without accepting them as authority, the spell begins to dissolve. This is why the spiritual path always begins with stillness. Be still, the psalmist said, and know that I am God. Do you see? Stillness is the doorway. Not frantic prayer, not desperate affirmations, not trying to impose truth upon appearance, but stillness. For in stillness, you step out of the reactive mind and into the awareness of the presence that has always been here. Goldsmith would say, stand still inside yourself. That is the secret. The moment you stand still, the mesmeric pull of the world mind loses its grip. You begin to see that the fear you felt a moment ago was not your fear. The suggestion of lack was not your belief. The impulse to panic was not your nature. It was all the activity of a universal hypnotism that only functions as long as you agree with it. So let us take a very practical approach. The next time a fear arises about money, health, family, future, or any other appearance, do not run with it. Do not try to overcome it. Simply pause, stand still, inwardly. Recognize this is appearance, not reality. This is the world mind presenting its illusion. I do not need to accept it as mine. That pause, that refusal to react, that moment of inner silence that is the beginning of awakening, you have stepped out of the dream long enough to remember that you are not the dreamer, but the awareness behind the dream. In that quiet instant, something within begins to stir, a presence, a peace, a subtle sense of I, not the personal I, but the divine I. And as you rest in that awareness, you begin to feel the hypnosis loosening. You begin to realize that you have spent a lifetime trying to fix effects rather than turning to the cause behind them. You have tried to smooth the shadows rather than awaken to the light that casts them. Breaking the spell of the world mind is not a battle. It is a shift from believing what appears to recognizing what is. A shift from reacting to life as a human being to beholding life as spiritual consciousness. A shift from external dependence to inner realization. And once this shift begins even faintly, you discover that you no longer live in a world of fear, but in a universe of divine order. You discover that your peace does not come from conditions, but from awareness. And you discover that awakening is not a future attainment, but a present recognition. This is the first step out of hypnosis. To stand still long enough to see that nothing external has ever had power over your life, and that the only reality that has ever governed you is the presence within. Now that we understand the nature of the world mind and the first movement out of its hypnotic influence, let us take the next step, the practice of inner recognition, for although standing still frees you from the automatic reactions of the world mind, it is recognition, quiet, gentle, recognition that reveals the reality behind appearance. And without this recognition, stillness becomes only a temporary pause. With it, stillness becomes the doorway to truth. My friends, spiritual awakening does not take place through effort. It does not happen because you try to believe something or because you repeat holy words. Awakening occurs when you recognize what already is. Recognition is the spiritual act that lifts you into the consciousness of truth. And it is this recognition that becomes your practice. Let me explain what I mean. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he was not presenting a doctrine to be memorized or repeated. He was revealing a fact of spiritual identity, a truth that must be recognized, not affirmed. The moment you attempt to force belief, you return to the world mind, which operates through effort, struggle, and mental strain. But the moment you quietly acknowledge the truth, without effort, without tension, you begin to live from the level of consciousness Jesus lived from. You begin to see reality as it is. Recognition, then, is not an act of the mind. It is an opening of awareness. It is the gentle, inner realization that behind every appearance stands the infinite presence, whole, complete, and untouched. And so we begin with the simplest form of recognition. I and the Father are one. Let this not be a statement of faith, but a moment of awareness. Let it sink beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath belief. Let it be a recognition of the fact that your life is not separate from the source of all life, that your being is not separate from the divine being that animates the universe, that your consciousness is not isolated, but rooted in the infinite. As you rest with this, another recognition emerges naturally. The kingdom of God is within me again, not as something to acquire, not as a place to reach, but as the truth of your being now. Let this recognition bring you into a sense of inner spaciousness, as though a quiet light were dawning from within, showing you that everything you have ever sought outwardly has been present inwardly all along. And then we come to the recognition that underlies all others. All that the Father has is embodied here in this consciousness, not in the bank account, not in the body, not in circumstances, but in consciousness, your consciousness, when it is aligned with truth. With this recognition, the world mind loses its power, for you no longer look to the visible realm for supply, safety, or fulfillment. You begin to recognize that everything visible is but an expression of the invisible, and that the invisible is always complete. Now, let us make this very practical. Take any appearance in your life, a financial need, a physical condition, a relationship tension, and bring it into your awareness. Do not attempt to fix it. Do not attempt to change it. Simply place it before the light of recognition and see it as appearance only. Then turn inward and rest in the awareness. The presence within me is the only reality. The truth of my being is untouched by this appearance. I and the Father are one. Remain quietly in this recognition, without thought, without effort, without trying to bring about a result. Do nothing to the appearance. Let it be. And instead, recognize what is true. As you rest in this inner knowing, the appearance begins to lose its sense of power, for you are no longer feeding it with belief. You are no longer granting it authority. You are no longer confusing the shadow with the substance. This is the practice of recognition, a practice that gradually lifts you out of the hypnotic suggestions of the world mind and reveals the spiritual reality behind every circumstance. As this recognition deepens, less and less of your life is lived in reaction to the outer world, and more is lived in attunement with the presence within. And, my friends, it is this attunement, not the outer effort, not the human will that transforms experience. Recognition does the work, because recognition is the light that dispels the darkness of appearance. And now, having come to an understanding of recognition, let us take the next step: how to live above appearance in the midst of daily life. For spirituality that functions only in meditation but collapses at the first sign of challenge is not yet realization, it is still aspiration. Our purpose is not to escape the world, nor to transcend it through belief, but to live in the world without being governed by the world mind. That is the essence of spiritual freedom. You see, the world will continue to present appearances. That is the nature of the sensory realm. Bodies will show symptoms, bank accounts will fluctuate, relationships will shift, nations will rise and fall, circumstances will change. The outer picture will always be in motion. But the question is, will you move with it? Will you permit every wave of appearance to govern your peace, your decisions, your inner state? Or will you stand in the awareness that behind the motion of form is the stillness of spiritual reality? To live above appearance means that you no longer grant authority to the surface of life. You may acknowledge what the senses report, but you do not accept it as cause. You do not let it enter your consciousness as truth. You recognize that appearance is effect, and that effect cannot dictate the state of the cause within you. Let us make this practical. When a financial need arises, the world mind instantly whispers, "You are vulnerable." Notice that thought. Do not react to it. Do not argue with it. Simply recognize it as the world mind expressing its belief in lack, and then quietly turn inward without strain and rest in the awareness. Supply is consciousness, not money. My good is not in the visible. My good is in the presence within. Do not attempt to manufacture abundance. Do not attempt to visualize outcomes. Simply return to the truth of being and let the recognition dissolve the suggestion of lack. As you do this, you will discover that right ideas come to you, right opportunities arise, right action becomes clear, not because you forced anything, but because you removed the veil that obscured what was already present. Or, let us take an example from health. When the body presents discomfort, the world mind responds with fear. It interprets the body as your identity and illness as a threat to your existence. But pause, be still, recognize that the body is not the self, and that the self is not confined to flesh. Rest in the awareness. Life is spiritual. The substance of my being is wholeness. The body can express only what consciousness embodies. This recognition does not deny the appearance, it transcends it. It brings the invisible reality into conscious awareness, and the appearance begins to lose its claim upon you. Or again, in the realm of relationships, when conflict arises, the world mind insists that personality meets personality, ego meets ego, and that someone must win and someone must lose. But spiritual vision recognizes the same presence that lives in me lives in all. The Christ in me beholds the Christ in the other. From this inner posture, Your reaction softens, your words change, the atmosphere shifts, and harmony emerges where tension seemed inevitable. You see, to live above appearance is not to manipulate the outer world. It is to abide in inner truth until the outer aligns with it. This is the meaning of living in the world, but not of the world. You continue to act, to speak, to work, to serve, but the source of your action is no longer fear, desire, or human will. It is the quiet guidance of the presence that has become your resting place. And let us understand this clearly. Consistency is more important than intensity. One moment of sincere recognition carries more power than an hour of mental struggle. Many short pauses throughout the day, moments in which you turn within, recall the presence, and recognize the truth will lift you far more quickly than occasional long periods of strained meditation. Gradually, the shift occurs. You stop looking to the outer world for your cues. You stop allowing appearances to command your peace. You begin to live from the inside out. You begin to feel anchored, steady, quietly, confident. And when the world mind presents its shadows, you meet them not with fear, but with the calm awareness of truth. This is the art of living above appearance, the art of abiding in the invisible reality while moving through the visible world. And now, my friends, as we begin to live from this inner awareness rather than from the shifting currents of the world mind, something remarkable happens. Not suddenly, perhaps not dramatically at first, but quietly, imperceptibly, like dawn breaking behind a still horizon. Fear begins to dissolve. Lack begins to lose its claim. Suffering no longer appears as an enemy, but as a shadow fading in the light of recognition. And all of this occurs not because we have waged war against these appearances, but because we have ceased granting them power. You see, fear cannot exist in the presence of recognized truth. Fear feeds only on separation, on the belief that you stand alone, apart from the infinite, subject to forces outside yourself. The moment you recognize, even for a breath, that the presence within you is the only life, the only intelligence, the only law governing your being, fear begins to wither, for it has nothing left to fasten itself upon. Lack, too, dissolves, and not because your circumstances suddenly change, but because you no longer look to circumstance as your source. The very moment you perceive supply as consciousness and not as matter, the grip of financial fear loosens. You stop treating money as though it were your master. You stop treating income as though it were your life. And in that inner shift, channels of supply that were always present but hidden by fear begin to reveal themselves, not through strain, not through forced positivity, but through the natural unfoldment of consciousness expressing itself, and suffering, whether emotional or physical, begins to lose its sting the moment you stop identifying yourself with the form in which the suffering appears. When you cease saying, "I am sick," or "I am distressed," and instead rest in the awareness, the I that I am is spiritual, whole, untouched by this appearance, then even the body begins to relax its grasp. The emotions begin to unwind, and the atmosphere of your being softens into peace, not because you have fought the condition, but because you have stopped empowering it with your sense of identity. Let us take this more deeply. Suffering persists only as long as you believe that life is happening to a separate me. This me, this personal sense of self, feeds on fear, lives on resistance, and thrives on the belief that it must protect, defend, and secure itself. But the moment you recognize that your true self is not the personal me, but the infinite presence that animates you, the foundation of suffering begins to crumble. And so, the dissolution of suffering is not a process of overcoming anything. It is the quiet recognition that there is no separate self to suffer. There is only the one appearing as you. There is only the presence expressing through you as harmony, peace, and completeness. Now let us return to the practical. When fear arises, do not attempt to remove it. Simply observe it and rest in the awareness. Fear is not my thought. Fear belongs to the world mind. I stand in the presence of the infinite. You will feel the fear lose its urgency. You will sense it passing like a cloud. When lack presents itself, do not rush into panic. Turn within and rest in the recognition. Supply is spiritual. All that I require is already present in consciousness. A quiet confidence will arise, not bravado, but the assurance of inner sufficiency. When suffering comes, do not identify with it. Gently declare inwardly, I am not the body. I am not the emotion. I am the presence that beholds these appearances. Peace will begin to permeate the experience, even before conditions change. In each case, you have not fought the appearance. You have not denied the condition. You have simply withdrawn the belief that the appearance has power over you, and that withdrawal is the dissolution. Now the law begins to operate. The outer picture must eventually conform to the inner realization. This is not metaphysics. This is not mind power. This is spiritual law. Consciousness is cause. Form is effect. And so, as consciousness rises, suffering falls away, not because you have improved your life, but because you have ceased to believe in the reality of anything unlike the presence of God. Fear dissolves in truth, lack dissolves in recognition, suffering dissolves in identity restored. This is the fruit of living from the inner presence rather than from the world mind, and this is the beginning of real freedom. And now, as fear, lack, and suffering begin to dissolve in the light of recognition, we come to what may be the most misunderstood word in all of spiritual literature: freedom. For the world believes that freedom means the ability to change outer circumstances, to control events, to secure favorable outcomes, or to arrange life so that nothing disturbs us. But this is not freedom. This is bondage to the very appearances you hope to escape. True freedom, in the spiritual sense, is not the power to shape the world, but the realization that the world has no power to shape you. It is the discovery that peace does not depend on conditions, that safety does not depend on form, that abundance does not depend on material channels, that harmony does not depend on the behavior of others. Freedom, as Goldsmith taught, is a state of consciousness in which nothing in the external realm can pull you out of the inner awareness of the presence. Freedom is the realization that you stand in the midst of a spiritual universe, governed not by chance, nor by circumstance, nor by human will, but by the infinite intelligence of God manifesting as your very being. Now, let us take this slowly, for it is a profound shift. Imagine a life in which nothing external can disturb your peace. Not because conditions are perfect, but because your peace is not rooted in the outer world at all. Imagine discovering that the same presence which lived in the prophets, in the mystics, in the Christ, is the very presence animating you. Imagine waking each day with a quiet assurance that the source of infinite supply, infinite love, infinite wisdom, Infinite harmony is not somewhere outside, but within your own consciousness. This is freedom. Freedom begins the moment you stop taking direction from the world mind. When you refuse to let fear dictate your choices. When you decline to let appearance determine your response. When you anchor yourself in the inner presence instead of an external circumstance, you step into a realm of life the world knows nothing about. You begin to experience what the mystics have called the peace that passes understanding, a peace untouched by the rise and fall of events. You begin to move through the world with a sense of inner poise, as though something greater than your personal self were guiding you, directing you, sustaining you. And indeed, that is precisely what is happening. Freedom also reveals itself in clarity. When the mind is no longer clouded by fear, desire, or resistance, intuitive wisdom begins to flow. Decisions become natural, effortless, almost obvious. Right action reveals itself without strain. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, speaking the right words, meeting the right people, not through planning or strategizing, but because consciousness has aligned itself with truth, and the outer life must follow. Freedom expresses itself in non-reactivity. The world presents anger, and you do not respond with anger. The world presents chaos, and you remain centered. The world presents lack, and you remain assured. You do not accomplish this through discipline or suppression, but because your identity has shifted from the human sense of self to the divine presence. And perhaps most beautifully, freedom reveals itself as compassion when you are no longer entangled in your own fears. You see the world's fears with tenderness. You no longer judge others, for you recognize the world mind acting through them, just as it once acted through you. You meet their suffering not with resistance or annoyance, but with understanding, for you know they are not separate beings struggling in isolation, but expressions of the same infinite life that animates you. This is the true meaning of freedom. Not that you escape the world, but that the world loses its power to define you. Not that nothing ever happens, but that nothing happening can disturb the presence within. Not that outer conditions become perfect, but that inner consciousness becomes unshakable. Freedom is the end of fear. Freedom is the end of dependence on matter. Freedom is the end of suffering born of identification with the separate self. Freedom is awakening to the truth that I am the place where God appears as individuality. And when this realization dawns even lightly, you understand that the world mind cannot imprison you, for it never contained you. You transcend it not by effort, but by knowing the truth of your being. This is divine freedom. And it is the birthright of every soul who turns within and listens. And now, as we come to the close of this sharing, let us return once more to the simplicity of the spiritual life. For all that we have spoken of the world mind, appearance, recognition, freedom comes down to a single, quiet truth. The reality you seek has always been present, not far off, not hidden, not withheld, but here, now, as the very essence of your being. You see, the spiritual journey is not a journey of becoming. It is a journey of remembering. Remembering what has always been true. Remembering the presence that has never left. Remembering the I that is one with the infinite. And though the world mind may have caused you to forget for a time, the forgetting never changed your reality. It only veiled it. Awakening, then, is nothing more than unveiling. It is the gradual dissolving of the clouds that have obscured the inner light. It is the recognition that nothing external can complete you and nothing external can diminish you. It is discovering that every breath you take is breathed by the infinite itself, expressing as your individual being. My friends, let us recognize this. You have never been separate from God. You have only believed in separation. You have never lacked anything. You have only believed in lack. You have never been threatened. You have only believed in vulnerability. The moment you turn within and acknowledge the presence even for a single breath, the belief dissolves and the truth is seen. This inner turning, this stillness, this recognition is the secret behind all spiritual revelation. It is not a practice for the advanced. It is not reserved for saints or mystics. It is the simplest act of awareness, to be still, and in the stillness, feel the presence that is your own being. This is the entire infinite way, and as you continue not in strain, not in discipline, but in gentle remembrance, something beautiful begins to unfold. You begin to sense that your life is not being lived by you, but through you. You begin to feel guided, carried, upheld. You begin to see that what you once called your life is the activity of the divine presence, expressing as you. Then the fears of yesterday lose their hold. The frictions of the world soften. The anxieties born of the separate self fade into quiet confidence. And the very atmosphere of your consciousness changes. Your home becomes a sanctuary. Your work becomes service. Your relationships become expressions of love. Your inner life becomes peace, not because you have improved yourself, but because you have recognized yourself. And as this recognition continues, quietly, gently, day after day, you awaken more fully to the truth that the kingdom of God is not a place, nor a promise, nor a reward. It is the reality of your consciousness the moment you know the presence within. So let us leave this time together in stillness, with no striving, no effort, no expectation. Simply rest in the awareness, I and the Father are one. The presence lives my life. All that God is, I am. And in that recognition, you will discover what the world could never give and what it can never take away. The peace, the wholeness, and the freedom of the awakened self. This is the reality that has always been present. This is the life that is living you now. This is the truth that needs only your recognition to be revealed. Let us rest in that truth quietly, silently, gratefully,